wasted food. I'm sure all of us at some point have done it. I know I certainly have in the past, and I'm sure many other people have as well. And that's what we're going to explore today. How much sort of food is some data coming in about how much food goes to waste. And our guest today, Jamie Crummie, co-founder of Too Good To Go, is going to give us an insight into the data. So, Jamie, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board. What does the data show?
Hi there. Yes, very pleased to be joining you today. And here at Too Good To Go, we've done some research, and we've commissioned some research which has found that nearly 19.5 million food items are wasted every single day, largely due to confusion around date labels. In fact, the research showed that a third of Brits admit to throwing food away solely based on the best before date. So really what this tells us is that date labels are hugely confusing, and it's resulting in people unnecessarily throwing food into the bin itself. And that, is hardly surprising, really. When we look at the amount of date labels out there, if we were to open our fridge, our cupboards, we'd be greeted with everything from a use by date to a best before date to a sell by to a display until. You can sort of see where I'm going here. There's a whole list of date labels out there, which adds to the complexity, adds to the confusion, and resulting in people not really knowing what they mean. Like again, if we double click into the research again, 1 in 10 Brits don't feel confident in explaining actually what the definition of a sell-by date is, and 14% aren't even confident in explaining the display until date. So really, what we have to do is alleviate some of this confusion. So here at Too Good To Go, what we've done is we've created a label where we work with different food businesses, we work with different retailers to communicate on the pack of food to use our senses, to look, smell, and taste food, not waste it once it's gone beyond its best before date.
Yeah, it's interesting. And in terms of, you've just sort of mentioned there, sort of the use by date and the sell by date. You mentioned a lot of people don't know the difference. What are the difference? What's the difference, let's say, use by, best by, and sort of displaying dates? Just for our listeners and for myself as well, really, you want to sort of clarify, because obviously, like everybody else, I check the date to see when the sell by, use by date is, and it can be quite a bit of a minefield. But
it's highly important for us to make that distinction. So when we talk about use by date, a use by date is a safety metric, and this is typically found on food items like fresh fish, fresh meat, these types of food categories. So when food has gone beyond its use by date, it isn't still safe to consume, isn't still safe to eat. Whereas a best before date is a quality guidance metric. So that food is still safe to consume, it is still safe to eat once it goes beyond that date. And then we have these sell-bys and display untils. These are often just internal date markings for retailers and for shops to help them with stock rotation. So as you can see, there's an easy mistake to make in what these labels actually mean. But let's remember, use by, that's safety, whereas best before, it's just a guidance. So that food is still safe to eat, still safe to consume once it's gone beyond the best before date.
Yeah, the only thing with that I would say, Jamie, is that, okay, so you could buy something, for example, that says best before, but then it's not knowing how long it's going to be okay. I've got to admit, there's been times I've bought, like stuff, and like, for example, like I've bought maybe some blueberries and I've brought them back and it's still in the date range, but I can see visibly there's like 3 or 4 of them that got that sort of white type of moldy type thing, and I'm like, yeah. So like I'm thinking, and then all of a sudden, sort of like, I start to think, oh no, do I take them out? It's one of them really. So I suppose for a lot of people, like different foods are going to be different. But I mean, when you mentioned best before, I mean that's the hard thing. I mean, how long do we know? How you mentioned that we can do a test, but as a general rule, it's hard to gauge how long we've got before we have to eat the food best before. If that makes any sense.
And this is where I go back to the test itself. So to use your senses. So to look, smell, and taste that food, not waste it. So in the example of those blueberries there, the ones which, you look at them, they got a bit of mold on them, probably is something that you wouldn't want to eat. But the others, which look okay, if they smell okay, they taste okay, they're fine to eat. I mean, I'd probably go down the route of either cutting the moldy bit off or washing them under the tap. But everyone has their different preferences. So really, what we're trying to say here is use your senses. Look, smell, taste that food. Don't waste it. Rather than just relying on that best before date itself.
No, definitely. And in terms of the, what would you say is probably the biggest factor in the amount of food? Because it's quite scary, really, to think that there's so much sort of food, being thrown away. I mean, what would you say is would you say it's down to the sort of people not understanding the dates, or what generally do you think? I mean, I suppose the other point you could make is maybe people, when sort of the other thought I have is if someone sort of like maybe they cook more than what they eat type thing, and kind of that's left over. But what do you think is the biggest thing that people can be mindful of?
I'd point back to the research and just re-emphasize some of those points I mentioned earlier, that the confusion around date labels themselves is one of the leading reasons for food being wasted. What we've seen is that nearly a third of all Brits admit to throwing food away based on the best before date, and a quarter of Brits throw away food past its best before date without even checking whether it's edible. And so essentially what this highlights is that people are confused around date labels themselves. So the big thing we want to get across today is that when food has gone beyond its best before date, it's still safe to consume, and we can use our senses. Look, smell, taste food. Trust our senses, trust our common sense to be able to identify whether that food is still good for us to consume.
Absolutely. And in terms of I know it's hard to sort of give any sort of tips because everyone's sort of like each case is sort of subjective, but you've sort of mentioned there about using our senses. Is that the sort of the main thing people can do? Obviously, sort of like if there's sort of any doubt, I wouldn't suggest anyone take any sort of chances. But I mean, sort of not so much for other people. What would you do, Jamie? I mean, you sort of seem to have this kind of your head around things here. But what would you do in terms of like to sort of identify food, like it is safe if it has the best before date? What are the things that you would do yourself?
Yeah, there's a whole host of different tips and tricks that we can all introduce and deploy within our own lives to help reduce food waste. And first and foremost, we can upskill ourselves on date labels, really understand that difference between a use by and a best before date, and remember that when food has gone beyond its best before date, it's still safe to consume. So that's the first big tip. The second tip I'd have is around like loving your leftovers and introducing some kitchen hacks to make your food last longer. So as simple as yesterday's bolognese can be tonight's lasagna, or when we have a bit of wilted veg, so those floppy carrots, we can put them root down into a glass of water and stick it back into the fridge, and it will become a bit more fresher. And then that third tip really centers around embracing technology. So there's apps out there like Too Good To Go, which enable customers, enable people to rescue food for a reduced price, food that would otherwise have gone to waste, from a whole host of different food businesses. They range from grocery stores to high street coffee chains to local independent cafes and bakeries. So there's my 3 for you. Better understand date labels, kitchen hacks to love your leftovers, and the third one is embracing technology and apps like Too Good To Go.
Absolutely, because you do have like some supermarkets that have like they'll sort of reduce the price on certain. Are they generally like best before dates, Jamie? When you see the supermarkets, like I know probably everyone's going to be different, really, but when you see the reduced price in some of these supermarkets, I'm guessing that's going to be for the most part, going to be a best before date, or maybe like close to use by date.
Well, here at Too Good To Go, we work with a host of different supermarkets, of different retailers. We work with the likes of Aldi, Morrison's, and some other retailers as well in the UK. And when you purchase and rescue a Too Good To Go surprise bag from these businesses, you can get a range of food. It can be best before date products, it can be used by date products, it can be fresh fruit and veg, it can be fresh meat and poultry, it can be dairy products, as well as others as well. So it really is this eclectic mix. But the big thing that centers around this is it's always a surprise. So you pay a reduced price, you don't know exactly what it is you're going to get, but it's all going to be food that would otherwise have gone to waste.
Oh, that's really interesting. I wasn't even aware of that, to be fair. But where can people find more information out, Jamie? Can you signpost people for more info?
It'd be my pleasure. So you can find out more information on Too Good To Go by heading to our website, to our social channels. Here you'll find loads of different tips and tricks and kitchen hacks, or alternatively, you can download the Too Good To Go app from the App Store or Play Store, and you can start rescuing food through the Too Good To Go app as soon as today.
Brilliant. No, thanks for that. So I'll check the app out myself, Jamie, when I got time this week for sure. It sounds really interesting. But thanks for your time. It's been really informative, and have a great day. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.